You're listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we're airing a session from Children's Institute 2023 on communication in a changing workforce.
My name is Timo Anderson. I'm from Zingerman's in Ann Arbor. Any of you ever heard of us? We're a food business. Okay, a couple people know of us. Great. We have 10 businesses in Ann Arbor. ZingTrain is one of them. So ZingTrain was created to share the things that we do internally with the rest of the country, with businesses of all types. And so we share about 15 different content areas between service and leadership and visioning and training that we did yesterday, and a little bit today on communication. And so thinking about communication intentionally, thinking about it with ways of processing, thinking about it with one of my favorite tools, a belief action cycle that we're going to share with you in a little bit later. But it's one of those things that has had a huge impact on us. And understanding that communication, if and when I go to organizations, one of the things that I talk about as organizational challenges, one of the first things I hear is communication. And then I say, well, what does that mean? And they say, well, there's all these kids who don't listen. They don't pay attention. They don't know how to talk. They don't know how to whatever. And I'm like, okay, great. Have we given them really clear expectations? And I talked about this a lot yesterday in my training piece, and I'm going to reinforce it again today. On page 2 in the workbook, the very first thing we do in a training is give you clear objectives. If you want to communicate and you want to get an expectation across, make sure you have clear expectations for that person. So by the end of this workshop, I want you to be able to define effective feedback and why it's crucial to high-performing teams. Feedback being a giving and receiving it. Getting clear on what that looks like. Consider the impact your beliefs have on both your willingness to give and receive feedback. Because our beliefs play a large role and have a large impact on how feedback goes within our teams. And then continuing, because you have 36 glorious hours here in Milwaukee to be able to spend building your network of peers. You have a huge number of people who are available and can give you that information to be successful and be new connections for you to engage with. Welcome. All right. That next section, that training compact in the middle of the page, I will do the same recommendation I did yesterday. You are more than welcome to take Zingerman's off of that and put your business name there. It is one of the most revolutionary pieces of training that we have ever created. Today, I'm going to be in the role of trainer, getting clear, documenting clear performance expectations. I just did that, providing training resources, the workbooks, the pens, the name tags, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have a workbook, you can pull it up on the app in the PDF. There is a PDF in this low section because it'll be harder for you to stay kind of abreast if you don't have an idea of some of the pieces that are there. Thirdly, to recognize and reward performance. Sometimes we have food, other times we have other things. Today, I get to recognize your questions with great answers. I get to continue the conversation afterwards and know that each of you have access or will have access to be able to talk to me if you have questions of clarification or how you'd like to move forward. The really interesting part, though, is all of those things are pretty standard education. And if you train staff, you probably thought of most of those things. Interestingly, on the other side, though, is to have and hold your staff accountable for taking responsibility for the effectiveness of their training. So I'll ask all of you, and I will repeat loudly so they don't have to run around, what sort of things can you all do in order to take responsibility for the effectiveness of your training? Yes? Ask questions. Great. What else? Yes? Pay attention. Wonderful. What else? Take notes if you're a note taker. Doodle if you'd rather doodle. Both are great. Stop me when you don't understand. Yes, because we have these mental eye roll moments. Have you heard of these? Because all of you are way too nice to roll your eyes at me. Okay, ground rule. You're way too nice to roll your eyes at me. Right? But a mental eye roll looks like exactly what you're doing right this very moment. Right? And I have no idea, and I could lose you for the next 40 minutes, which is the rest of our time together. So I would much rather you hold your hand up and say, I'm not buying what you're telling me. Right? That's what I would rather you do in that moment. The other thing is, it says here to take responsibility. How many of you sit still for 45 minutes at a time? One person in the back. Thank you, brave soul, for raising your hand. Right? The rest of you can get up and move around. We had a 2-hour session yesterday, 8 people moved during 2 hours. You can walk up and down the aisles. I'm totally cool with that. There's space up here to do yoga. You can stretch. You can sit against the wall. I don't really care what you need to do to take responsibility. What I want you to do is say, I got everything out of this I could in this 45 minutes. Does this make sense? We used to think of this as a 50-50 split. We realized it's actually 100% on both sides because percentage of responsibility goes up in blocks of 100. We learned that from a book called The Corporate Mystic. And it's important for us to think about that because it is key to our success in being able to do these things. At the bottom of the page, we have our mission statement there to kind of think and create, for us, a clear North Star that everyone is working on. We've been around for 41 years now as a food business, started as a deli, now have 10 businesses, including ZingTrain. Our key element is making sure that we share that Zingerman's experience. This training compact and mission about creating this experience, if you notice in the mission statement, it doesn't say for customers. We want to share this experience for as many people as we possibly can. That includes all of our coworkers. That includes connecting to our coworkers and thinking, how am I going to make sure that we have a great experience for all of my coworkers? All those things that I'm going to do. That includes the process of giving them the right information at the right times because feedback is a huge component to communicating challenging information. It's not conflict. So to be clear on page 3 of what is peer feedback, thinking about this, communicating it clearly is a concept of making sure we have feedback, but it's doing it all the time. So feedback isn't just at the 3-month review, the 6-month review, or the performance review at the end of the session, or the end of a year, the end of your probation. It's a regular component of how we can do things. And it's not really for challenging or conflict-based conversations. We think of that as a different format. We call that courageous conversations. We have a webinar on it. We have some articles on it. Please know, because I will probably forget to say at another point, ZingTrain.com has a whole bunch of free webinars, a whole bunch of free essays. It's available for all of you to access, and then know that you can reach out to me afterwards. So when we're thinking about feedback, it's on some sort of work product, on some behavior, coaching, or education. Right? It's not only constructive and critical. We want it to be feedback of positive nature as well. Thinking about balancing what we're doing and how we engage. It's very easy as leaders within your organization to think of and notice, and it's why you are probably a leader in your organization, right? You notice all the things that are going wrong, right? There's dust in the corner. This book is unshelved. This one is unsightly. This isn't there. Like the table looks a mess. Whatever those little things are, you see them intuitively, and you see the things that staff could be doing even better. And yet, we need to be equally balanced. And I will tell you that lovely sandwich, whatever you call it, doesn't work. Everyone know what I mean when I talk about the sandwich? Yeah. They never pay attention to the compliments. Never, ever, ever pay attention to the compliments. It doesn't work. Why is peer feedback really important? We spend most of our time with our colleagues, not always with managers, right? And your staff does as well. So giving them a tool of how am I going to engage with these individuals and be connected is one of the cool things we can do. And no one's in a better position than colleagues to give that feedback. Because if we're doing this effectively, we're getting to a point where we're getting better. The goal is for the individual to get better, for the process to get better, and for the people to get better. And so the service overall of your store, your shop is there. So, is there a benefit to this? Absolutely. It helps us think about the other person, and it helps the other person grow and get better at what they're doing. So this is what we're trying to do, is we're all trying to get better in this place. We're also not hanging on to information in our head. Anyone ever had thoughts about something they'd like to share with someone that they kind of let stick? And then you get a week later, you're like, oh, I could have said that. Now it feels weird because it was last week, and then this thing happens, and then this thing happens, and we kind of get in our own head about it. It's also in the best interest of the business. when we're thinking about it, feedback also is really important and beneficial about work when it builds alignment. So we have some similarity, because if we're all doing things a little bit differently or we're handling pieces differently, it helps us get really clear on here's what we can do and getting in alignment with how we as a store engage with this process, with this person, with this product. How do we talk about challenging topics when teens are asking questions about books and using books as a vehicle? Thinking about alignment of how we share that information in an open and effective manner. What are some barriers to giving feedback? I'll ask you. What are some barriers to giving feedback? Time. Yeah, what else? Can be taken as criticism? The power dynamic, right? The top down, whatever else, or the top, yeah. How many of you get taught at some point in your career to give good feedback? It's a dearth of answers, right? Because the thing is, we don't always feel confident in going and giving feedback because we don't practice it. We don't get taught. We don't think about, here's the tool, here's the thing we can do in order to make this business better. So it's something that we find is a real challenge. And some of us have gotten feedback in the past and it didn't go well. It wasn't comfortable. And so those beliefs about feedback roll into ours of like, if I say this, they're going to feel the way I did, and that's not going to go well. So how do I do this in a more effective way? And then we spin it in our head, and then we don't have any time, and then we don't do it. Right? Which gets us into more and more problematic situations. Maybe that other person hasn't received feedback well in the past. Right? You've seen possibilities, you're like, okay, well, if I do that, it's going to be the same thing, and then it's go this way, it's going to go this way. Even though it's constructive and positive, and you're thinking about both of those sides, there might be that possibility that it's going to go badly, and that can cause fear in us because we don't like conflict, or we don't like confrontation, or we don't like any of these pieces. And then it might negatively impact that relationship. If I share feedback with someone, it might negatively impact the relationship, but I don't want to do that, and so am I willing to just live with it, which is actually, if we're honest, negatively impacting the relationship because you aren't comfortable. So it's just choosing your discomfort over their discomfort in the relationship, and you can't actually move forward because it's not being stated. I'll go back to those clear expectations, right, with each other. So, barriers to receiving feedback that we know of, and it's from a lovely book. Thanks for the feedback that we use, in case you're interested. There's a truth trigger, there's a relationship trigger, and an identity trigger. The truth trigger. The feedback is wrong or unfair. Focusing on what went wrong with the feedback instead of just hearing it. You told me at the wrong time, we were in the middle of a rush, that didn't work, right? That wasn't fair. You told me as I was leaving, you told me when I first arrived. There's all sorts of reasons that it's wrong, but it's not because I did something wrong, it was just because it was the wrong way of getting it. Relationship, this goes to your power dynamic. Who are you to be giving me this feedback? I've been here as a part-time employee on weekends for 3 years, and you've only been here a year and a half full-time. You have so many more hours than me, but I've been here longer than you. What sort of role do you have to give me any sort of feedback? Because I want the business to be good. Period. Identity trigger. I feel threatened by the feedback, individual as a person. And so the personage becomes the focus of this individual. So being very clear of separating the work and the person. Getting clear on behavior versus attitude when we're thinking about these processes. Do these make sense in framing this feedback component? All right. My happy tool here. This one impacts, and I apologize in advance, because this one not only impacts your work relationships, but I will tell you have belief cycle with every person you are connected with. Coworkers, family, partners, children. Believe you me, at 18 and 13-year-old, I have lots of belief cycles about my children right now. Lots. And one of them's heading to college, and I still have belief cycles about them, and I'm like, ah! But here's how it works. So I want to make a situation. Coworker has shown up late, right? And oftentimes has a challenging energy. Anyone ever had a coworker like this? Right? So if I go through this process, my belief about giving them feedback on this situation is not going to go well because of which of those three triggers? Which trigger do you think is going to be not going well for someone who shows up late and has a challenging energy? Let's pick one. We'll go with relationship up here in the front, right? So my belief is it's not going to go well because of relationship, because I value relationships more than anything else at work and want to have a strong relationship with everyone, and I feel like this is negatively going to do that. So giving this person some sort of feedback on being late and having a challenging energy is going to negatively impact that. So what are my actions if those are my beliefs? How do I act towards this person when they show up late? Annoyed, some passive aggressive, like, oh, it's nice to see you. And you might have your watch, oh, it's so nice to see you. Like as you're pushing your first cart of books that they are not helping with. Okay? Anything else? Might you stand near the door? Be closer to the door at starting time because you want to see when they come in? Maybe feeling apprehensive. So standing kind of off to the side and feeling uncomfortable, knowing it's going to happen and having some stress about it. Okay? Now, if you are that person who shows up late, and Timo keeps being there, maybe doing some passive aggressive, and then doing some, some kind of shying away in the corner, and then looking at the watch and doing these behaviors, what sort of beliefs do you have about work and me? What? Dread. Going, this seems really weird. It didn't used to be that with Timo, but it's a little awkward. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening, but there's this weirdness. Micromanager, they're always watching me, like, seriously, get off my back, like you don't have to watch how I pick my nose. I can pick my nose, I can't pick my friends, I can't really pick my managers either. Right, so those are their beliefs now. I thought this was a family-based organization or really family-based feeling, and it doesn't feel very family-like unless I had a different type of family that isn't dysfunctional family that works in a different way, and it's like, oh, this is what that is like. And what are my actions? If I'm that person, not me, I'm the other person who shows up late, based on those beliefs. Trying to stay away from the manager. Defensive? Is that what you were going to say? Yeah. Defensive, cold shoulder, not only probably to the manager, but that rubs off on a bunch of other people. Maybe some embarrassment. And if I have that, trying to stay away from the manager, is that going to make me excited to show up on time? Which becomes a self-fulfilling belief. Because I've now helped this person into a situation where they are now doing exactly what caused the initial problem or challenge. And so thinking about this process, how does this work that we might have a role? Now, beliefs come from experience, books, right? Childhood, all sorts of different inputs. They are changeable, but they take a lot of work to change core held beliefs. One of the things we know, though, is it's really easy to change your actions. And there's a Paulism, one of our co-founders, Paul, who likes to say, when furious, get curious. When furious, get curious. Because if you found out the information or knew what was going on, maybe this character, this individual, this coworker, their car is broken and in the shop. And it's a really expensive repair, and they're saving some money to pay it off. And so they've been taking the bus, but the option is to show up 5 minutes late or to show up an hour early. And they have children at home, which makes it really awkward to get there an hour early and sit there and not get paid for an hour. If you knew that about this employee, do you have a different belief? Is it the same exact action? Because that person was embarrassed to have to tell anybody that they didn't have the money to pay for the car repair. That employee is doing the same exact thing. That coworker is doing the same exact thing. We just have to have some information. I'd like you to take a couple minutes and answer those two questions at the bottom of the page. For those of you who don't have workbooks, it's what do I believe about giving feedback to my colleagues? And what do I believe about feedback given to me by my colleagues? And I'd like you to start each of your phrases with I believe. So I'll give you a couple minutes to work on writing those down. I'm assuming that many of you could do a lot more writing and a lot more answers, but I would love for you to turn to someone near you that you didn't come with, or add someone who is not part of your group if you want to be in kind of a 3 or 4. So add people to your tables, kind of connect a little bit. I'd like you to talk for just a couple of minutes of what did this make you think about? Not so much sharing your beliefs, but what did this make you think about as you were writing down and thinking about belief cycle and thinking about feedback? So share for a couple moments. We'll hear a report out. All right. I get to watch our runners run around a little bit now. So who would like to share one thing that they had discussion about this? One thing that they were sharing came up in their discussion. We're runners. There we are. Yay!
I find it important to take into consideration how I feel when I get feedback into how I give feedback to others.
Awesome.
Because I know that I get taken aback a lot because I didn't know that I was doing something wrong, or I got caught doing something wrong knowingly.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, okay. But I need to remove myself from the situation, distance my personal self from the work that I've done, and then change what I do. But taking that knowledge, how I feel about something, into how I provide that kind of feedback to someone else, I think that's important.
All right. Yeah, somebody else. Over here. 2 more. Yeah.
Let me get the mask off.
Well, you got a mic.
I know, but we discussed the fact that when giving feedback, making it feel like your workplace is a safe place to make mistakes, and that it won't be the end-all, be-all, because when we get feedback and we make mistakes, it's not the end for us, and it shouldn't be the end for your employees either.
Yeah. Awesome. One other feedback. Up here in the front. Yay! You get a mic. So it can be on the recording.
Thanks. We were talking about how it's hard to separate, when you're giving feedback, there's this, it feels like part of what you should be doing is separating, like your personality or your individual traits, your identity, I guess, from the work, and give feedback to the work. But it's hard, I think uniquely hard in this business, because we are asking people to bring so much of their personality to work, that when you're sharing feedback with somebody, it often, their work ability often relates to elements of their personality. So it's hard to parse that out in a feedback situation.
Yeah. So one of my favorite examples, thank you, one of my favorite examples of this is there's a bad habit that is terrible, and I hope that I never did this, but the smile more, right? You need to smile more concept, right? We've heard of this. There's some uncomfortable giggles, right? Nervous laughter. At Zingerman's, what we do is we teach the 10-4 rule. So this is attitude versus behavior. So it's not smile more, but our expectation is 10 feet you smile and make eye contact. Now, some people say, well, this doesn't work comfortably with a lot of individuals, especially introverts. They don't like this concept of having to smile. But what we've found is actually they're more effective and enjoy it because they know exactly what's expected, and they can meet the expectation. We give clear behavioral pieces, so it's not personality-wise of, right, I just don't like to smile. Great, you can not smile the other 16 hours of the day, right? Depending on your shifts, right? But while you're here, our expectation is you smile because there's two things that happen. When you smile, your energy goes up naturally. And if you don't like smiling, if you want to get the same neurological effect, just put your pen between your teeth and bite down. It causes the same neurological responses as smiling. If you're in that mood, like, I don't want to smile, you'll get the same thing and you'll get a positive boost. And the thing is, it also boosts the other person, right? Including coworkers. So we do this smile thing. So we start to get clear on, it's not positive attitude, but behaviorally we want you to follow the 10-4 rule, getting clear on this expectation. So starting to parse out a little bit as behaviors, what are the things we're looking for? Not stomping or trying to minimize the personality that brings you in, but at the same time getting clear that we have certain expectations within that. So in order to think about this a little bit more, on page 5, we have characteristics of effective feedback. Trying to get really clear that we want it to be balanced. We talked about this, but thinking about your feedback, if you have to give them critical feedback, have you filled their emotional piggy bank first? Gallup did research on keeping staff loyal, and I know we talked about that in the keynote of how do you keep staff. They did research and wrote the book, First Break All the Rules, in 1998. I know it seems old now because 1998 is like back when near when I graduated from college, and it feels a very long time ago. But I still believe very truthfully in it. And the number 4 thing out of 12. And by the way, cash didn't hit the top 12. Once Maslow's needs are met, cash did not keep someone loyal to an organization. Raises did not keep someone loyal to an organization. Number 1 is, do I know what's expected of me? Number 2 is, do I have the tools to do it? Number 3 is, does someone at work care about me? And number 4, have I been appreciated in the last 7 days? First Break All the Rules. First Break All the Rules by Gallup. The book, First Break All the Rules, I know it's available lots of places. I don't think it'll be at your children's bookstores. It'll be in a business section. It is an older book. You can also go online for Gallup and know the 12 things. But number 1 is, do I know what's expected of me? Number 2 is, do I have the tools to do my job? Number 3 is, there's someone at work who cares about me? And number 4 is, have I been appreciated in the last 7 days? For those of you who were here yesterday, you'll know my emphasis, that training compact. If you look at the trainer side of your training compact, what does it say? It's on page 2 of your workbook. Number 1 is, do I know what's expected of me? Number 2 is, do I have the tools to take care of it? Number 4 is, being rewarded by appreciation or recognition. My favorite part is Maggie Bayless created these in 1994, and Gallup came out in 1999. She did it without any research, and they did it with the research, and hers lined up perfectly, and is part of the reason I believe we built a culture of communication, because we ask trainers or leaders to be following these expectations on a regular basis. We want to fill the emotional piggy bank because at some point we're going to need to make a withdrawal, and if nothing's there, we go into deficit, and that doesn't work. It needs to be timely. Right? If I wait for Sonia and I wait 6 months to tell you what you did badly, you're like, I don't even remember yesterday, let alone like 2 weeks ago or like 6 months ago. Like, I have no idea. It's not going to work. Be timely. Specific. and detailed. We want to think about what you specifically observed. You were in the stacks putting books on the shelves, really efficiently and effectively. There were 10 people who walked past you in the past 10 minutes that you didn't make eye contact with, and that's really important in our shop because they had some questions and they had to find someone else. One of them stood behind you for about 30 seconds hoping you would turn your head. Specific and detailed. Not you gave bad service or you have a really bad customer service attitude. That doesn't help because they don't know what they're doing. So be very specific. We want to try to provide clarity for our staff, our coworkers, for the individuals we're working with, whatever our role. Because the thing is, it's setting up a coworker for success if we give them feedback. If we see the things they're doing, it's setting them up for success. It's not trying to drag them down, but it's helping them be more successful in the role. This is one of the things that helps me get past some of my barriers, because I will tell you, this is still a challenge. It's an ongoing, lifelong piece. But knowing I'm setting them up for a better chance of success helps me give better feedback when I need to. And if I don't share it, am I actually setting them up for success, or am I helping them fail? It's a real question. It needs to be future-focused. You can't go back and redo what's already happened. But here's what we can do in the future. Hey, it looked really uncomfortable when you were talking with that customer. Would you like to role play that? Would you like to have an opportunity to practice what that conversation might look like so you have the opportunity to be able to say this, this, or this? Let's think about opportunities of how we make this easier for you as you move forward. Where were some of the missteps and what could we potentially do in order to do those differently the next time? And then one of my favorite when I first learned these 6 concepts was it should be relationship enhancing. And this is where I sometimes get the eye rolls. People are like, feedback has never been enhancing. I have a coworker at Zingerman's who literally has fired people who come back and give her hugs and thank her. We haven't figured out how to document what she does. We don't even know how to really explain it. We just know it's the case. Like literally somebody comes up 3 months later like, oh my God, thank you for firing me. Like, I don't get it. I've asked and it doesn't make sense. Right? We want to be about the work, about customer outcomes, how someone could strengthen their performance. Right? Strengthen their performance as employees, as coworkers, as individuals within your business. Now, I'm going to jump to the other part, which is 6 tips for receiving feedback, which is something that we don't oftentimes spend a whole lot of time on because it's one of those things that we're like, oh, you just listen. Nope. Because it's almost impossible to just listen. I was talking at breakfast about this concept I read, I think last week, that hearing is a biological behavior and listening is an action. Just like walking, talking, and doing other things. And so getting really clear on this concept that you actually need to be acting in a listening manner. You can't just be doing it, then it's just hearing biologically. Responding versus reacting, fight or flight, not able to think clearly. This goes to your initial concept of like how you feel, somewhat like you talked about, it feels uncomfortable, you feel taken aback, you feel caught off guard, right? And you get into that fight or flight, like, oh, I just need to go, like, I don't want to have this conversation, I don't want to be here. Right? Getting really clear on these pieces. One of the phrases we can get back to is, I'd like to think more about this. It seems like you've taken a lot of information and thought about this, so I'd love could I get back to you tomorrow? Could I get back to you in an hour? Could I get back to you after lunch? Number 2 and 4, get really clear in being able to listen for understanding and focusing on the content instead of delivery. I'm on page 6 for those of you following along in your workbooks, in case you weren't there. Listening to the content. They may be new at feedback, and so they may be uncomfortable. So getting really clear that letting them have this practice, and even though their delivery may not be awesome, what is the content they're trying to share? Getting clear on listening for the content instead of just how they're delivering it because they've startled, because they're shocking, because they come up and kind of catch you off guard. Right? And they might say, Robert, da 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 da, and you're like, whoa. And you could immediately flare up at them because of how they shared it with you, or you could say, okay, this might be real. Let me see if there's a nugget in there I need to respond to and be able to get clear. Number 3 is asking those clarifying questions, seeking first to understand. Trying to get clear that we don't ask questions that are loaded with judgment, which sometimes is that passive-aggressive component we talked about earlier. And so thinking about, hey, are you able to give me some examples or give me an example? Because I'd love to get clear on what you mean. And this one, step 5, can be sometimes really hard to stomach. To thank the feedback giver. Right? But here's the thing, how do you encourage this conversation to happen again and again and repeat throughout your organization as you thank people for giving that feedback? I'll share, you thank people, even customers who complain at you for that feedback, because that feedback is a gift. It's the same thing internally for a staff person who comes and talks with you, whether they're a coworker, anyone else within the organization. That feedback is a gift because it takes a lot of energy to get ready and bring that up and have that conversation and bring it forward. We're grateful that they took that time and effort to be able to take care of that. And then the last one is decide what to do with that. What are the implications of me making some sort of change? Right? How do I start to do these pieces? Thinking about how to be neutral in my initial response as opposed to other ways. Is it a preference from them, a personal preference, or is it a real thing that needs to be done? Getting back to your idea of, is it a personality piece, or is it a real thing that I need to change because it's negatively impacting? All right. Specifically thinking about this, we talked about how beliefs impact our conversations, the feedback we give, and the feedback we receive. Talked about tools that we're able to get through that process. Would love to hear from one person or 2 people in the time we have left. Your thoughts, reflections of what was most interesting, surprising, or useful from today. Question number 1 in our final reflection on page 7.
Hi, Kelsey from Big Square Books. I think the most useful thing that I got today was the 3 different triggers that we talked about: truth trigger, relationship trigger, and an identity trigger, because I think it helps me, it gives me a lens through which to look at any type of feedback giving session to get through it and get the best possible result.
Awesome. Thank you. Somebody else. Interesting, surprising, or useful? Wait, you need a mic. They have to hear it on the recording.
I've never really been very good at this sort of thing, so for me, doing it in a timely manner is in the moment before my resentments start kicking in, and that's very much a me thing, but yeah, it makes the conversation so much easier if I'm not resentful.
Absolutely. And they know exactly what it's about because it just happened. Yeah, in the back.
The phrase you shared before, when furious, get curious.
Yeah.
That was big. That was big. Look at the bigger picture. And I just had a recent episode where that would have helped.
It helps with kids, too.
I noticed during the first self-reflection that I'm, as a leader, feel much more confident giving feedback, but need to practice receiving it, because that was very scary.
Yeah. It is a lovely circular process, and the more we give and receive, the better off we're going to be, the more effective we're going to be, and the better communication you'll start to have at your organization. So, I want to thank you. It's 9:45. I'm available at ZingTrain.com. You have all sorts of resources. I'll be available. My email's there. Remember, there's an evaluation on the web, on the app, so please fill that out. We'd love to hear the information. It'll be shared with me as well. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your experience.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!